Hi guys, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Design and a Half. In today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about the skill called critical thinking and how this one applies to design, but not necessarily only to design, to IT skills and soft skills as a whole, because critical thinking as an asset is really valuable to a lot of types of organizations, not necessarily those who rely on design skills or IT skills, or basically any type of organization that relies on people trying to find solutions to commonplace or non-commonplace problems. That is basically what critical thinking is applied to. Now let's think about critical thinking and see what it actually is. So in terms of definition, critical thinking is a sum of different types of things like analysis, communication, creativity, problem solving, and open-mindedness. Those are open-mindedness. Sorry. Those are sort of the traits that form critical thinking, as well as they are the scaffold upon which it builds itself. However, thinking about it in layman's terms, critical thinking is just an individual's ability to rationalize his thoughts without the influence of bias to the best of his abilities, basically. And how this applies to design especially is the fact that we as designers usually have a lot of influence in our work, whether it's from stakeholders, whether it's from people who we meet, whether it's from friends or other designers in our circle of people that we know. The problem is that design is susceptible to bias just because there's so many influences that just surround it, and that's the main reason why we need critical thinking as designers to be able to push this bias as much as possible to the side and try to rationalize a good solution or the proper solution for the proper problem as much as possible. And this ties into UX a lot of the times just because of the nature of how UX is uniquely positioned between development as well as design as well as business, and is sort of like a pivoting point between them. And this is why critical thinking is such an important skill to have as a UX designer, just because it helps you sort of digest the information that you are being given, either through channels such as user testing or business model canvases or informal meetings with stakeholders or various other ways that information just comes through to you as a designer. This is why we need to rely on critical thinking to digest those things and see how we can apply that information into sort of silos and find what the relationship between those informations is, so that the conclusion that we come to is one that is the most appropriate, if you will. That's the best analogy I could make in this situation. That being said, I would really like to point out that critical thinking doesn't have anything to do with criticizing other people and other people's opinions, and it should not be perceived as being critical towards others. It's just a way to find if an idea or a concept is good enough just by playing devil's advocate and being sort of the person who is both the advocate for the idea as well as the person who tries to strip the idea down to find out what the risks are. Think about it in sort of like this. Say you want to build a prototype for a ship, and you build the ship, or actually you want to build a ship, and you're thinking about this from the perspectives of both the designer who wants to make this ship beautiful, as well as the engineer who tries to make the ship fly as fast as it can, or the one of the engineer who wants to make this ship feasible to fly with as little fuel as possible. So these are all perspectives of various people that are involved into the design process of a product, whom through critical thinking we can sort of appropriate by understanding their own perspective on a product itself. So thinking about it from my example earlier, a rocket has several perspectives that influence the outcome of the final product. First of all, it's the engineer who decides how or where the engine is being put. Then there's the person who designs the chassis on which the engine is being put. Then there's other people who design how much fuel this how the engine is made so that it consumes a specific amount of fuel to be able to return back to Earth in this situation. This means there is an intent there, and the critical thinking part of those people always relate back to the problem that needs to be solved in the first place, and that is get the ship back on Earth, or at least part of the ship. Make sure that the crew inside gets into space in time, and they do so safely. Second of all, make sure that the engine does not blow itself up while doing the takeoff part. There's several items that enter into this whole discussion which are absolutely normal and are present in any type of product themed discussion. So whether we're talking about rockets, whether we're talking about mobile applications, this sort of critical way of analyzing the information that we have and just gathering information, like what are the requirements, what are the constraints, what are the informations that we have at hand with regards to the task that has to be solved. All of these are parts of the critical thinking process that sort of refines the idea into something which can be made and which is usable and is buildable in a way. Okay, but why is critical thinking so important? Well, it's one of those skills that is domain general, and this means that it's not restricted to a specific type of domain like engineering or math or whatever. It's critical thinking can be applied to absolutely every aspect of your life, and is just one of those basic blocks of decision making as a concept that we all use in our day-to-day lives. So it's not, if you're educating yourself into being a good critical thinker, you're investing into making good decisions across your life, not necessarily only in your job. So from that perspective, I see that critical thinking is a skill that is very useful either inside as well as outside your job. It's also, critical thinking is also very important if you're thinking about the current economy that we're in, because it's driving information and technology, and it's one of those skills that offers IT the most advantage right now. It's very useful in a fast changing workplace like IT, where things happen instantly and people have to react to whatever the market offers in a very timely fashion, if you want to. And this is why critical thinking is so prized among most of the IT companies that are looking for designers or for developers or for actually whatever person that needs to make a good decision or a decision in the first place in that particular company. If you're thinking about it, it also sort of promotes and enhances your language and your presentation skills, because it makes you self-reflect on your own self. Self-reflect on yourself. It makes you self-reflect and look at your own actions and see objectively where you've made mistakes and try to correct them in the future, so that those mistakes do not repeat themselves. It also sort of promotes creativity, because it sort of gives you a lot of variables that are more or less working in the sense of a constraint within a given frame, for example, trying to solve a specific solution, you're being given these types of constraints, like you have to use this platform, you have to use these tools, you have to use the following people to work with, and you have the following time span to work within. Those are all constraints that give you a boost of creativity, and as well as sort of forcing you to be critical about the whole process and looking at the constraints that you have and making decisions based on those constraints, rather than just trying to find the best possible solution with disregard to the constraints that you already have in place. The thing is, ironically, that in a lot of ways critical thinking could also be an inhibitor for creativity, and the reason why I'm saying this is because usually what happens when you're trying to analyze a solution, you tend to disregard the fact that there might not be a box there in the first place, and instead of focusing on finding a good solution, you're focusing on finding a solution based on the information you have at hand, without thinking there might be some information that you have not accessed or did not think about accessing, for example. And here's the conundrum I have, because in a way, yes, that makes sense to have critical thinking promote creativity, but at the same time I feel like it's not 100% true, and in some cases, especially in software development, sometimes those things can work against you. However, that is only because budgets are seen as a sort of like a constraint, which is oftentimes unrealistic, because the budget is made so that the profit rises more than it should. Because if what I've noticed is that a lot of companies use really aggressive profit margins on a year-to-year basis, just to be able to drive up sort of this super fast growth. And I think it's, first of all, I think it's unreliable on the long term, and second of all, it could be so aggressive that it could not support itself in long term, because that means that you have to aggressively target more sales, you have to aggressively target more people to hire, and it's just sort of this race against the clock until you reach the apex where you are not being able to contain that sort of speed. It builds up like a momentum on the product itself, and at some point you're going to run out of viable ideas that make up the product, and they end up making a product no longer fit for the user that was originally intended for it, or they will make the product unattractive for the user they initially designed it for. And that's going to be a problem, because it's going to affect your revenue on the long term, and it's going to send you in a downward spiral, because this is sort of the effect on a lot of companies, or actually on a lot of larger companies that are doing this artificial growth scheme, where they tap into financiers, and the pressure is really high to hire people who are really talented at innovating new features, just because they need that innovation as a requirement for marketing to be able to sell more new features. And this is the fallacy of the whole thing, because at some point it's going to become very difficult to find new features and at the same time support the ones existing, because people don't necessarily always want just new features. They sometimes want the current features that are already built into the product working as they should. And in most situations, when there's a rush for new features to be added into a product, what ends up happening is that the stability part and the stabilization process that is normally part of companies who have a lot of products gets sort of pushed to the side, and people just focus on delivering the new stuff, which is sort of like trying to shift the consumers or the people's attention away from the buggier parts, and it it's how enterprise and consumer software ends up having this look of a huge carpet with a huge mound beneath it, where all the crap that you don't want to see is stuffed in. And long term, that's a really bad thing to do. However, getting back to our original topic related to critical thinking, it's really important to use critical thinking as a way to self-reflect and think about what you do good or wrong. But think about this from a really objective point of view, because you shouldn't necessarily criticize yourself too harshly, but look at it from an objective standpoint and think, did I really do the best thing I could in that situation? How could I have handled it better, and how can I do this better next time? This is something which rarely happens, because in order to self-reflect to a specific level, you also need to let go of your ego, and that is very, very difficult for a lot of people, solely due to the fact that the ego is sort of a driving force behind a lot of stuff that we do, and a lot of people depend on that ego for their feeling of self-fulfillment and of self-worth, if you will. However, I feel like it's sort of a false sense of self-fulfillment. It's always that voice inside your head which usually tells you, no, you're much better than this. You're much better than this. You obviously are better, but usually the ego overinflates the reality with about 30 to 40%, depending on your type of ego and depending on the type of person you are and how you were raised. Because ego roots itself deeply into your own experience as a child. And the way you were brought up. If you are the type of person that was always told, dude, you are the best, you are number one, you're always going to have a huge ego, just because people were always proud of you and they always told you that you are right no matter what you did, you're always the best, and so on. Whereas people who have a lower sort of ego are those that parents told them, you didn't do this right, and were usually people that were very criticized in a younger age. That's how they developed a lower ego, because their sense of importance is not as great as the one of people I mentioned earlier, who are really praised a lot and told how amazing they are, and so on and so forth. However, this could prove as an advantage for people with a lower ego, because they can be very objective with themselves, or actually they can be more objective with themselves than people who are having larger egos, as I mentioned earlier. Last but not least, critical thinking is also the foundation of science and democracy, and the reason why this statement is so very, very important is because critical thinking is something that analyzes facts instead of fiction. It's a way to it's a way for reason to triumph over social issues, over political issues, and so on. We're thinking about those things in a very realistic way. We analyze the facts, and we are trying to not get biased by the information that is sort of fed by the media, or at least if we do, and if we have contact with such information, we cross-reference it and go and take it through a logical or a rational sieve, where we think about it and see, does this and this make sense? Does this affirmation, this concept that was brought up to light by that specific newspaper, match the facts that this person has or that we know about? For example, say XYZ newspaper says about so and so is a thief and a liar and so on, and in our case we have access to that person's I don't know, police records. We can go and cross-reference them and see, does this person indeed have did this person indeed commit those crimes or not? Because if not, in that case it's a lie, and we can use this critical thinking skill of ours to determine whether something is true or false. In this case it's false, and we can sort of use that to inform others of the fallacy at hand. This is sort of why critical thinking is so important for democracy and for a functioning government that is doing good for its own people. From my personal experience, I know for a fact that critical thinking was a really good thing, or a really important skill I acquired while being part of several trainings, communication trainings that I've been through, I think around 2015 up until 2016. They helped me understand or be more in tune with myself in terms of who I am, why I'm making certain decisions, and try to analyze myself a lot more in order to determine why I make particular mistakes, and see how my current behavior was the result of particular childhood events or things that I've been through, and why there's this report of causality between particular events. Personally, I've been always a huge fan of observing people, and I think this was the biggest thing that helped me develop critical thinking skills, because I was able to cross-reference people's behavior with people's information and determine whether or not an action that one person did was because of their sort of stereotype, or it was because of who they are, or their personality type. Like, thinking about it, how someone dresses, how someone behaves in a particular situation, what could their motivation be in that particular case, just by analyzing other people in similar situations and determining what those motivations could be for those people. So you sort of build up this network of situations and cases that if you run through them as a scenario, as a virtual scenario, you sort of understand why particular things happened in a particular way, and those give you the motivation behind actions of people, as well as their traits, if you will. This is really helpful if you're a UX designer, because most of your time you're going to be spending it by analyzing human behavior to first of all either counter certain things that we do, or come in their defense, or sort of in their support, if you will, and make sure that the applications that are being built with respect to how people function, how people think, what their action patterns are, and what their personality traits are, if you want to. That's why critical thinking is so important for UX designers and designers as a whole, because we work with a lot of information that we have at hand, and it's very useful for us to look at that information like a huge whiteboard, and put all of the information that we have, like these small sticky notes on it, and just reference it back to those sticky notes, and draw all sorts of lines between those sticky notes to create a network of events, information, features, relationship between particular events and things and people as well. That's how, from my perspective at least, critical thinking works. So if you have the chance, to participate in any communication trainings that give you insight into your own personal, sort of in your own personality, in your own personal life, in your own decisions that you make. Try to take those communication trainings, and if possible, don't scoff them off. Don't think about them as something you have to do as a chore. Try to go with an open mind in those trainings and see whatever good you may take out. Don't look them as, oh, I'm so amazing at this, whatever could I learn new. Absolutely every training that you're going to take part in is going to give you even a small new perspective, and that is super important. Like, we as people, regardless if you're a designer, if you're a politician, if you're whatever you are, we have the opportunity to learn from a lot of other people around us. We sometimes don't do that just because our egos are way too big for us, and we don't find, or we think we won't find anything of value in people who might be lower on a seniority level than us. But sometimes, and actually this is from personal experience as well, I've noticed that we have a lot of things to learn from other people, regardless of their seniority, regardless of their background. You could even be surprised of what you would find out if you would ask a simple person on the street just random questions. You would be absolutely surprised what they would tell you, who they are, who they met, and so on. I think every person is a treasure trove of information that is untapped in terms of finding more about the world. So in our position as UX designers, like myself, I'm very fortunate to have this possibility to know a lot of different types of people and to interact with them and sort of absorb part of that knowledge they've gained into my own, to broaden my whole world perspective and my knowledge about everything around me. And I think this is really amazing in terms of, I know, job perks. In conclusion, critical thinking important. Think about it and try to see whether critical thinking is a skill that you are lacking, and if it is, please let me know whether I could help you out with links or any types of other information that I might be having with regards to this subject, as well as any type of communication trainings that I might know of with this in mind. That being said, thanks a lot for sticking with me. Thanks a lot for tuning into this episode. I hope you have an amazing week. Unfortunately, I wanted to make this episode yesterday, but I had a small issue and by that I mean I was on a run, and I was supposed to be getting back home earlier to be able to start recording the podcast yesterday. I got home way too late, and I was super tired, and I decided, okay, skip it. I'm just going to do it tomorrow instead of Monday. But just as a rule of thumb, usually you'll have Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You'll have episodes of Design and a Half coming each week. I'm hoping to keep this as a thing from now on. If you want to, please also check out the Facebook page for the podcast. I'll be posting regular interesting stuff there, as well as on Instagram too. I have some ideas about what I would like to do with this community, but I would super appreciate if you guys give me some input on this, what you expect out of it, what you would like to see more from, as well as like reading materials, whatever you guys like shoot me any types of ideas. I'm super open to them. I would be happy to see you engage with me and the podcast itself more, if you have the time. If not, I still appreciate you taking your time to listen to it, and I think you're really cool for that, like for supporting it for being here and clicking those download buttons and tuning in. Okay then, enough rambling for today. Have an amazing rest of the week, and hear each other next time. Bye bye.